Hi, welcome to Living Resilience. This is a little outpost on the interwebs that for 11 years now we've been supplying resource and practices for the collapse aware and collapse acceptant communities around the world. My name is Dean Walker, and this particular video is the first in a series of 8 videos reflecting the preparation for 8 different Zoom calls that will be our only opportunities to be somewhat face to face in our most recent 4-month course offering, 4-month cycles of this course offering called The Inner Work, Being Together in the Great Unraveling. So this first month and this first of 2 Saturdays in the first month of this course, this preparation is about reconnection with deeper self. If you've been around this course at all yet, if you've seen some of the basic materials, you know that each month of the 4 months has a particular theme. They're all reconnection. So the first month, this one that I'm talking to you about right now, is reconnection with deeper self. The second month will be reconnection with others, with other people. The third month of this cycle will focus on reconnection with Earth and with the web of life. The fourth month, the focus is reconnection with soul. I know that that can be kind of a vague term or be interpreted in many ways. We'll get there. When we get there, we'll cover that ground when we arrive in the fourth month. So this relatively brief video is our one chance to have very specific prompts and kind of a fertile ground in which to explore what is it to reconnect with deeper self in a time, in a culture, in a era of humanity when the predominant energy, the predominant intent of the world is to disengage people, the mass of people on the planet from our own personal center, our own personal sense of home or common sense or connectedness with ourselves, others, earth, and soul. That seems to be the intention of, for instance, in very bold form here in the USA since the entirety of 2025, in which a number of very powerful groups standing behind and reinforcing the power of the Trump 2.0 presidency. What we're able to see is that they have zero intention to empower the masses of people around the planet and certainly not in the USA. In fact, what we're seeing more and more plainly is that the background intention, whether it be with Trump and his team directly or the Christo-fascists that are behind the entirety of the structures of this Trump 2.0 presidency, often called Project 2025, or the broligarchs, the tech executives that are pouring billions, trillions into the manifestation of their ultimate dream of a zero-sum competition being won by one of these massive companies. All of these groups and a few more that make up what we call the Dark Alliance, um, they are instrumental in affecting how this world is working right now. And by any description that one can muster at this point, what we're seeing in the USA is the crushing of anything to do with a democracy, anything to do with cooperation, anything to do with mutual care. So many of the pieces that for many of us, we recall a time when this is woven into, with all of its flaws and so on. It's never been a perfect system, nor has it been a perfect democracy. But that whatever's left of the intentions of mutual care, community building, cooperation, collaboration amongst different populations of people in any given nation, those intentions, those perhaps grand dreams are being crushed one by one. The last remnants of them are being crushed by the current administration here in the USA and other right-wing fascist dictatorships as well. So these are unusual times. We started out 11 years ago. Well, actually, before I get to our start here in living resilience, I'd like to just mention that I became collapse aware and soon after collapse acceptant in my mid-teenage years in the mid 70s. And that what came through a number of very different, diverse sources, mentoring, a very unusual young adult formulation of to be what's it like to be collapse aware. In other words, that the systems, the earth systems and human systems will eventually fail, will eventually collapse, and it'll be a human caused collapse. This is the essence of the message that I got in my mid teenage years, and then really had to take it on for the rest of my life to hold that message in an important way for myself, just to be start to make sense of it. How do you make sense of that? Because I had virtually no regular adult companionship, parenting, and mentorship in the usual way. I had no way to make sense of this assertion, this very strong impression on my system that we would be collapsing both Earth and human systems. So that's the vast majority of the background of my life through an unusual and wonderful run of working with corporate clients around the world and also working with at-risk youth and community development programs around the world for the entirety of my career. So that leads us up to just a few years ago. It was about 2010 that I started to reconnect with. So, what does this mean, and what sort of messages am I getting? Have I been getting during that long career that we are indeed going to be causing or are causing human caused collapse of both Earth systems and human systems? I had a pretty long recall and rich, varied recall of the messages that I got throughout that long and really wonderful career. That indeed, this is where we are, and this is where we're headed. And it was kept getting worse and clearer that that's where we were headed during all those decades. So I get to about the 2010 era, and I got some specificity with regard to responses to my question of, so when is this really going to be obvious, really going to be crystal clear and inarguable, this collapse of Earth and human systems and the human causality within it? It was then that I started to do some massive research into this is, in fact, happening now. It is not happening as was hearing peripherally over the decades. Oh, it'll be somewhere around 2100. We're going to have some pretty rough times. That's about as much gravitas as it had from, usual news sources or supposed experts. But from that 2010 moment on, I really got it very, very clearly in my system that this is not only happening sooner than 2100, it's happening within my old guy lifetime. This absolutely inarguable human caused collapse is happening within my old guy lifetime. So I started to write a book, The Impossible Conversation, choosing resilience and reconnection at the end of business as usual. So that book came out in 2017, and what I got to see out of the researching the book and then writing the book, uh, I got to be clearer than ever that this is indeed an impossible conversation. The conversation to even broach the topic of human caused collapse of both Earth and human systems, it is indeed the impossible conversation. So, how can I be of service to a world in which that level of truth telling is literally impossible? I, I've always been one for a big challenge. So I have really committed my life since that time of putting out the book and coming to those realizations that what I wanted to do was offer as much support and resources and practices that we might take on individually and in small groups around the world, ideally, to expand our capacities, both individually and collective, expand our capacities to be present in the face of these collapsing aspects of our world. What you're now watching is the first preparation component for the first month and the first Saturday of 2 Saturdays in that first month, where we'll have Zoom conversations face to face. Embedded in this conversation of how can we expand our capacities to be present in the face of human-caused collapse or ever-expanding stressors. Each of these Saturdays is meant to be a very experiential and embodied opportunity to do this exploring within bodies and bodies interacting with bodies. Even though it's virtual, there's very much we can do to create a sense of coherence, a felt sense of coherence where those pressures from outside, the people who are running the world now I consider it to be a very dark and existentially threatening way. How can we generate in the face of all that a sense of coherence in any size circle that we might want to consciously participate in? That's at the core of this work, is to create a relatedness, a different way of relating, a different way of thinking, a different way of having an embodied experience rather than a heady experience in which we are our judgments of others, we are our fears, we are our grief, and we identify with each of these things and we concretize it in our system. There is not much aliveness left. There is certainly no agency left in the average person's experience of what it is to be alive and involved with. I'll speak entirely at this moment for folks here in the USA. So I'd like to offer you a couple of video clips in this particular first Saturday of 2 Saturdays in the first month of this course we like to call the inner work, being together in the Great Unraveling. The first one is an expert in the realm of fascism and how it shows up in modern cultures. His is an incredibly brief but extraordinarily potent quote. We will then have another longer clip This one from a voice I have only recently come to enjoy. He's quite clear and quite helpful in finding a human way to speak about what is it to come together in these times, to kind of swim upstream against the resistance from the leadership, the dark leadership, to find one another, to come together in a conscious way at all levels, whatever level a person can engage on. If it's just within your own household, within your neighborhood, your community, your region, and so on. None of us is going to have the answers, but this is a time to ask ourselves very deep questions. And here again, just a reminder what the questions are that we're bringing and what I'm asking us all to bring. The question that we might start with in these Saturdays in this first month is, what does it take? What is it to reconnect with deeper self? How can I do something other than the constant identification with the social media level reality, with the constant reactivity and identification with surface level or social media level identity, rather than whatever the deeper elements are within our bodies, within our relationships that we could cultivate that would help us to expand our capacity to be present in the face of human-caused collapse. One last word before we get going with these two clips and really a bit more of the context as they can lay it out of what is it to uh, reconnect with deeper self in these times. I'd like to just mention to you a piece of mentoring that I got from a very dear friend and a wise man here in Southern Oregon, where I live. He he mentioned, and he's not the first or the only mentor or person in my life who has suggested this is the time to find our people. This is the time to do our inner work because the times are going to get much tougher. This is advice from 10 years ago, and I've heard that same advice, something like it, on a very regular basis all the way back to the mid 70s. So the time is up. That what was luxurious amount of time, he was actually speaking just 10 years ago as if time is short. Get on with it. Get into your deeper work. Find your people. Sit in circle with those people. Build skills and expand capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. So one thing that, again, this is just my point of view, my perspective, and very much my reality. I'm not expecting you certainly don't have to believe the same thing, have that same experience. You may have a very different experience, and I invite that. Please come on in, share what is real for you with regard to these existential issues. But the idea is, I think, relevant and somewhat motivating, somewhat useful to take it on now, to do your inner work, learn more about your inner workings, and also what does it take to expand your capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. That could be an extraordinarily valuable capacity to expand. It will easily make you more effective at being of service to those you love in these trying times. So that's why we're doing this course. That's why we're starting here with how to reconnect with deeper self. We will have, of course, the different areas of focus in each of the other 3 months, making it a 4-month course cycle. Welcome here. I hope you find great value here. I hope you also find kindred spirits to walk this path with, that you'll find some company and also enhance your skills at holding space for others and allowing yourself to be open to others holding space for you in some of the challenging conversations and process work and so on that we will be doing in our time together here in the inner work, being together in the Great Unraveling. So first, Professor Timothy Snyder on why is this happening? Why is there such a vicious attack from the paramilitary police force, the largest in the world, that calls itself ICE here in the USA? Why are they attacking at this moment this city of Minneapolis, Minnesota? Why would they be doing that? What could be the motivation? Why are they being so vicious? This could be this one prompt that is offered by Professor Snyder in the form of his interpretation of the why. This could be enough of a prompt to hold this entire course, not only for 4 months, we could make this a 1 year course. There's much depth to be explored here on an individual level and on a collective level. I hope you'll find great value in Professor Snyder's words. And then in the next segment, I hope you will also find some not so much hope. I'm not a big hope fan, and we'll talk about that later. But I hope you find alignment. I hope you find coherence. And most importantly, I hope you find possibility in the second and longer clip in this particular video. Thank you so much for your attendance here, your participation here. We look forward to you bringing your resources for us to share and explore and understand, and for perhaps for us to share with you as well. Again, my thanks for you being here, and look forward to seeing you on the other side of this video and into the next and the next and the next. Bye for now.
Why is ICE in Minnesota? Because Minneapolis and Minnesota have functioning welfare states. Because Minneapolis and Minnesota are parts of the United States that work. They're parts of the United States where people actually are able to live more or less free lives. That is why ICE is there, to try to prove that that doesn't work, to try to destroy it, to try to create an image of chaos where things in fact had been functioning before. Why is ICE in Minnesota? Because Minneapolis and Minnesota have functioning welfare states. Because Minneapolis and Minnesota are parts of the United States that work. They're parts of the United States where people actually are able to live more or less free lives. That is why ICE is there, to try to prove that that doesn't work, to try to destroy it, to try to create an image of chaos where things in fact had been functioning before.
Abolish ICE by the end of January. We can get the Epstein files released, even though King Magus warned us his friends will get hurt. We can prevent World War III and get a grip on this earthquake of corruption before it swallows us all. How do we do that? Oh, the same way Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. won voting rights and desegregation laws only 60 years ago. He gave us the playbook on how to defeat the Confederates, who are otherwise going to keep coming back and haunt us until extinction, and I'm not sure how many more chances we're going to get. Dr. King and the civil rights movement won their battles by refusing to campaign for any political parties, by using direct action outside of regular politics to force change. And the movement was so effective, it actually flipped the political parties upside down, turning red states into blue, blue states into red. Dr. King's next step was dismantling militarism and establishing economic rights for all, meaning we could have avoided everything happening now had we continued the job that he'd left unfinished, making our cities affordable for everybody, which Mayor Mamdani and Governor Hochul just showed us we can do very easily, providing childcare, which is the very minimum a city should do, because the whole point of living together in a city is so we can care for all the people who live in it. If we can do that in New York City, one of the capitals of the world, we can certainly do that with the whole planet, but only if we stop falling for the game that the Epstein class has been running on us for quite a long time, the one where we feel like we're drowning, but we're really just face down in a puddle, and all we have to do is stand up. Less than a third of us are MAGAs in this United States, and that's consistent across the whole world. Right-wing ideologues are tiny little fragile minorities. Most people are born into those authoritarian cultures, and sadly, that is where they're going to remain for the rest of their lives. It is very difficult to extract that comms cable that's been plugged into the back of their heads. It was installed there by a trillion-dollar industry that's manufactured this whole so-called conservative identity. It is an artificial Frankenstein's monster that seeks to feed on only power and wealth, whose pursuit requires being anti-immigrant, anti-kindergarten values, anti-peace, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-intellectual, anti-social, anti-anything that sounds remotely different than whatever's flowing into their heads through that tube, which has them scapegoating everyone and everything outside their matrix as the cause of all what are now debilitating insecurities, leading them to the painful and truly idiotic conclusion that if only the rest of humanity can be controlled, or better yet, extinguished, only then will they be safe. In other words, this whole caricature is a monster that devours itself. So there's an ancient parable about a king called Midas, and he too worshipped money and power, and that made him wish that everything he touched would turn to gold. And when that wish was granted, he was giddy. He touched his chair, he touched the table, he touched the street he lived on, his house, everything around him until he was just swimming in gold, the richest man on earth. But that glee turned to horror the moment he tried to get something to eat, the moment he wanted a drink of water, tried to hold the hands of his children, his family, and found out that everything he touched was now turning into something worthless, lifeless, a hunk of metal. And so King Midas starved to death, leaving behind nothing but a broken heart filled with remorse, having forgotten the purpose of his human nature and its proper relationship to material things. So this is the religion of the MAGAs, except their Magus touch is not a metaphor. It does turn everything that it touches into something of no value. From the White House to the Kennedy Center, the Constitution, courts, Congress, the military, everything King Magus has touched has been turned into a joke, a trash fire, and a crime scene, stripped of all meaning and purpose. Now maybe we can hose away the wreckage and rebuild something worthwhile, but only if we stop following the orders of the Epstein class, who want us just eternally, individually sifting through all this debris, debating a horde of trolls who are eating all this torched garbage, thinking it's food, telling us to convert to their religion or we're going to hell, when we can see that they are living there already. We know this game they're running. It's called flooding the zone. Look, the EPA no longer cares about protecting human life. Is he pocketing the money he stole from Venezuela? I think that's an ICE agent with a Nazi tattoo who just kidnapped. Oh my God. Is he invading Greenland? So flooding the zone keeps us from staying focused on the singular task of simply shutting off all the funding for King Magus and his tiny band of mad, sad zombies. Flooding the zone is also the favorite diet of that ogre we call corporate media, which wants us trapped in their shallow world, a casino of nonstop outrage, a rat maze of dopamine hits and targeted ads, which means not only steady profits for them, but plenty of opportunity to control the narrative. And before we can say, hold on a second, before we move on, they've flooded the zone again, hit us with another tidal wave. The corporate media is going to continue doing everything they can to oppose, bury, cover up any coordinated mass action against corporate power. But all they have is their story, which we can now see right through. And it's not really a tidal wave, it's just a puddle. We have the power, the numbers, time is up, we know what to do. Organize with mass actions around a clear demand. Abolish ICE. Prevent World War III, release the Epstein files, and hold the filthy rich accountable for their crimes. That is not the end zone. That's just us clearing the field. A strong majority in the United States and most other countries believe that it's now time for humanity to work together to move to a well-being economy. And why is it that the economy is most people's number one issue? Is it because our economy is in shambles, collapsing under rampant inequality and greed, as evidenced by professional economists the world over who forgot the meaning of the word economy, a term coined by Aristotle, which means household management? So, of course, the economy is people's number one issue, because what's more urgent than caring for the household of our family, the household of humankind? As to the pursuit of wealth and power, the religion of King Midas, King Magus, proselytized by a half-century of Epstein-class propaganda, for that, Aristotle had an entirely different word than economics. He called that crematistics, greed, charging interest, using money just to make more money. That practice is one that every wisdom tradition since the dawn of time has warned against. Not because there's some ethereal voice in the sky saying don't do that, but because it does injury to a person's character and collapses their society. And so, if we're speaking technically, the system that we live under right now cannot even rightly be called an economy, since by definition it's not managing our household, it's just a pyramid scheme. And so our demand for economic rights is not radical, except if you live in the shallow world of corporate media. No, this is supported by a majority of humanity. It's a restoration of common sense, and it was Dr. King's dream. The abolition of poverty, universal health care, a basic income, things that are necessary for a secure society, and to prevent fascism from rising again. The unfinished work of FDR, who established the first majority middle-class society in recorded history, who defeated the Nazis the last time and said economic rights should be the second part of our Bill of Rights. FDR was our truly last democratic president. If by democratic we still mean demoskratia, people rule, which means human values rule, caring for each other above all, not the worship of things, gold, and idols. There is no alternative to the demand of basic economic rights and working with each other to provide for them. This is a requirement for the survival of civilization, which in 2026, with all the technologies that we've created and grown dependent on, requires cooperation. Globally, not just between nations ruled by Epstein's best friends. Cooperation between our cities, our towns, villages, rural communities, all across our delicate habitat. And like Dr. King's civil rights movement did, with its mass strikes, boycotts, civil disobedience, disrupting the status quo, we can make this inevitable if we unite, organize, and act. No matter how many big banks and corporations materially support King Magus's army of neo-Confederate stormtroopers, they cannot rule the people currently kettled inside these so-called United States. Far fewer than 1% of the U.S. population are police, military, paramilitary, etc. The place is 3.8 million square miles. It has over 1 million roads, over 19,000 towns and cities. Our food, our water, our power, internet, finance, transportation, healthcare, every type of essential labor is all flowing through vast civilian-run networks. So anytime we want, all it takes is a tiny fraction of us to walk off the job with support from our neighbors and family, and for a tiny fraction of us, especially the wealthier ones, to pull all their money out of the big banks, put their assets into ethical credit unions, divest from the empire of oil, weapons, extraction. As soon as the Epstein Islanders start feeling any heat at all of those people who own and run the world are going to start frantically calling their politicians in Congress on both sides of the aisle. You know the aisle, the one that runs down the center of that big toxic chain store, that sells nothing but credit cards, weapons, and oil, and those people are very quickly going to turn on the Trump administration, fearing we're about to take the nation back to that Roosevelt era of 90% top tax rates, massive social programs, the ones that created a middle class in the first place. Worse, they're going to fear the pendulum is going to swing even further this time, as they scramble to stop us from discussing a far better economic and political structure, one that empowers local communities with global technologies, instead of concentrating power in the hands of the greediest among us, which strains those people's already limited mental and emotional capacities into total madness. Speaking of which, have you visited that one webpage recently? The one that the greediest man on earth purchased when he spent more money than we would need to feed all the hungry people on earth, just so he could buy a web page to get more attention? Yeah, don't ever go in there. We've kind of learned everything we need to know from the Magus touch. But the one lesson that's more important than any other is that our representatives aren't actually powerless. They can really do just about anything, even the ones called Democrats who pretend that their job is summarizing the news. Those people, the ones in Congress, actually have countless tools at their disposal to stop the government in its tracks right now. For example, they can object to unanimous consent. They can demand a quorum call. I hereby object to the motion to proceed. I want to force full reading of the bill and blah. Look, they don't need us to take them back to law school. Half of them passed the bar, and it's no wonder they're so excellent at doublespeak. But what they do need is to be reminded daily of their responsibility to use those powers at their disposal to filibuster and defund right now, permanently, the invasion of American cities by paramilitary soldiers in masks, demanding to see papers under the command of a very short man in a very long Nazi trench coat. We can remind them by phone, letter, email, nice polite posts under their cute little billionaire-owned social media accounts. And they need to be reminded that as of 2026, the government they are steering is no longer ruling with our consent. So their job is to filibuster and shut the entire government down until ICE is abolished. There's no more talk of invading other countries, and the Epstein files are released. While they're doing that, we're going to back up Minnesota, expand our boycotts, prepare for national strikes, and reach out to our friends and neighbors who are going to need our support. We're also going to get educated on what a real sustainable future looks like for planet Earth, and then start building it. What other point is there for being here?